There has now been a significant development in the Oak Beach, Gilgo Beach murder or murders case. That development is that an escort, an active escort here in Suffolk County, has determined to come forward and discuss with the press, discuss with the public, that this escort met former Chief of Police of Suffolk County, James Burke, at a party in Oak Beach in 2011. And at that party, she had sexual relations with former Chief Burke, for which he paid. This is the first time that there has been an actual connection made between former Chief Police Burke, Oak Beach, and prostitution. It's the first time this has ever occurred, and that's why it is significant. Up until now, there's been a great deal of surmise about Chief Burke and his involvement with Oak Beach. We have circumstantial evidence that he had some knowledge of Oak Beach, his assignment, for example, to the 1st Precinct in that area, possibly his assignment to the Marine Bureau in that area, and his connection with Dr. Peter Hackett, the former police surgeon of Suffolk County, who was the head of emergency medical services for several years back in the 90s. We now know, a new development has also occurred today, we now know that James Burke and Dr. Peter Hackett were in connection with each other, working with each other in the late 1990s with respect to Flight 800 and the crash. So they knew each other, they certainly had a connection with one another, and when you take that and combine that with the knowledge that we're giving you today, you'll see that these are significant developments down the road on this case. So essentially, that Leanne, who sits next to me now, is going to tell you what I've just told you, that there was this connection with Jimmy Burke. Now, Jimmy Burke never mentioned that, his involvement with Oak Beach, in his sentencing to the federal judge when he was sentenced for the crimes that he has been convicted of and for which he is in prison. He never mentioned that connection. Now it is being made. This escort has had the courage to come forward and give an affidavit to the effect that I have just said. That affidavit would enable me to examine Jimmy Burke under oath as part of the case that I have brought on behalf of the estate against Dr. Hackett. He is no longer just conjecture, he is now a potential witness in fact. So I will attempt to cross-examine or examine former Chief Burke under oath as soon as the case that's pending in court is decided. So that's another development as well. Jimmy Burke, the same man who had porno in his car, the same man who was soliciting prostitution, the same man who was responsible for the investigation of the Gilgo Beach, Oak Beach murders, is the same man who met this escort in Oak Beach and solicited her and had sex with her and paid for it after the investigation had already commenced. So that's why we're here today. And without more then, I'm going to ask that Leanne be willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Spell your, is it Luann or
Leanne?
Leanne, L-E-A-N-N-E.
And do we get a last name or?
No.
There's no last name.
Are you going to make a statement or do we start?
I think you should ask questions.
So I have a question. So you're alleging that
these parties where Burke was at, where you were at, were other people there?
Yeah.
Were other law enforcement there?
I mean, I would imagine so. He was there. I mean, I don't know specifically, but I mean, I would imagine so.
But it was a party. There were numerous people there.
Yeah, there were numerous people there. I mean,
Drugs?
yes,
Right. And so this party, where did this party happen?
Oak Beach.
Can you just start out by telling us the story of what happened, how you
might be a
came
better
to
way to
meet
go,
James Burke?
I was invited by a friend while I was at Stony Brook University. Well, during the time in April, I was not at the university enrolled as a student. I was at another school, but I was still coming back to Stony Brook because I was going to be reinstated in September, and I went to this party with a friend, as I often traveled back up to New York because I didn't live here at the time. I lived in Rochester, so I came with a friend, and there were other girls there that I knew that I would rather keep under the, I don't really want to reveal that. I was told by someone, because my area of study, in which I have my bachelor's degree from Stony Brook, is in, crime, forensics, things like that. So I was introduced, well, not introduced, but I was pointed out to him. He was pointed out to me as a high-ranking official. No one really gave me his title, anything like that. So, I continued to party, and I remember that the outfit that I wore was not really consistent with what you would see an escort wearing. I had on, I think, Abercrombie & Fitch cut-off shorts and, just some stupid shirt and, Converses. So I didn't really come across as anyone who was, someone you could solicit for sex. So I remember walking by him and saying hello. That was pretty much the extent of that interaction. There was really nothing untoward that occurred at that point. I came back again in August for another party. It was at the same location. And at that point, I was dressed a little bit differently. I remember what I was wearing, and it was a little bit more risque. I had never, up until this point, ever accepted money for sex. This was actually my very first encounter with pay for sex. So, well, what I would like to add from the first party is I did see Jim Burke grab a girl by her hair and drag her to the ground. I don't know how playful it was or how aggressive it was. I don't really know. I wasn't right next to them when it happened, but I do remember that. She was an Asian girl. So the second party I went, I was a little more risque. I encountered him. We had a conversation. It wasn't really much. I was fairly intoxicated myself. I was not on cocaine. I've never done cocaine. It just, a whole lot of booze. And I remember hearing that he was high up, and I figured, all right, this is my opportunity for, a PBA card from a high-ranking official. That was just a joke in my head. So he started to do things like, as we were talking, he would rub his hand up my leg, which, I'm a woman. I know when a man wants sex. So, I kind of took the cue, and he kind of guided me to the bathroom where we started to engage in sexual behavior. He was frustrated because he could not consummate the act. He began to get really aggressive, and he used the term that I was not a good whore. So at that point, he began to try to reach, ejaculation through oral sex. But it wasn't really oral sex. It was more of him grabbing me in an aggressive manner by my hair, himself inside of me, choking. I remember tears, not tears from crying, but tears from how aggressive it was. I was tearing up, and he still couldn't reach a point of ejaculation. So he kind of just gave up and threw money at me, which was my first encounter with getting paid for sex. Was with him. Now at that point, I didn't know that he was, so high ranking. I actually went back to a police officer friend of mine later on and told him about the encounter, and he said that he referred to him as Jimmy. That was Jimmy Burke, and I said, "Who's Jimmy Burke?" And he showed me a picture, and I said, "Yeah, that's him." And then I saw him again when he got arrested. I remember seeing him being let out in handcuffs and thinking, well, that makes sense because he's, not a very nice person. I had called in a tip on an unrelated manner to the Gilgo Beach Task Force. I called in the tip a couple of months ago. I received a call from the detective in charge of the case, to one of the two. That's what they told me. His name is Detective Portola. He actually revealed me to the person I tipped on. He revealed that I was the CI to the person that I called the tip in on.
I have a question. You were there not with an escort service. You were there just as a party.
Just as a party, but
All right, so you were never affiliated with any particular escort service. Did you have knowledge, or did you know any of the victims of the murders?
I did not know any of the victims.
Were there other escorts at this party?
Yes.
How do you know?
Now that I've been in the business now for 6 years, and in hindsight, I can look back and say the behavior, two women on another person's lap, being led, leading into adjacent bedrooms and doing certain things.
But you're making an assumption. You don't know that the individuals were escorts. You didn't identify the women that were there as escorts.
If they walk out with money in their hand, doesn't that make them, doesn't that make it more suspect?
Is that what they did?
Yes.
And did you and Burke agree to a monetary amount
No.
before? How much did he pay you?
He threw me like a wad between $300 to $400. I can't really recall. It was just a wad. At first it looked like $100, and then when you know how sometimes when you have really crisp bills, you kind of push them apart and you notice that there are more underneath. That was the situation, and I was a little dehumanized, but kind of like, oh, well, I didn't know that I could make that money for 15 minutes of not doing much. So, that's...
And this happened after the investigation was already underway?
This was in, the first time I met him and just, in passing was in April 2011. In that area, April 2011, and then I know in August 2011 is when we had our mini tryst.
Can you tell us what the Gilgo tip was that you wanted to tell police? That's unrelated to this?
The tip that was made to the police by Leanne was related to the Oak Beach case. However, it wasn't a tip about Jimmy Burke. It was a tip about someone else, and Leanne does not want to reveal that person.
Okay.
And it's not, it really would not advance the point that we're here for today.
And how would you characterize his behavior that night?
Aggressive. Aggressive, arrogant, untouchable.
Were you afraid that night, or now have you been afraid since?
Not until they revealed me as a CI.
When you witnessed him drag a woman down to the ground, and you say you don't know if that was aggressive or playful, were you alarmed? Did it look to you like something you should be concerned about?
Well, she seemed to be laughing, which was almost maybe that is consistent with his behavior. She has, encountered him before, and that was something that it was consistent. He kind of just wrapped her like this and kind of like went like, took her down, it hurts more if you just grab by one strand, but he kind of like went like this and just kind of dragged her down, and she didn't seem to be too frazzled by it. I mean, I would have been. She seemed to be more, you know, I guess, used to the behavior.
Has your friend that was there that night provided the same testimony to John? Or?
They're not going to speak, but I have stated that I will take a lie detector test. I have no problem doing that.
And whose house were you at the night of the sexual encounter?
The house is she can identify, she believes she can identify the house, which was a large house, a year-round house at Oak Beach, and it was adjacent to the beach. The actual person who owned the house, it's not all that clear at this point, and what she does know, she'd rather keep confidential at this point.
John, there's, you know, if we take this as truth, then Jim Burke was at a party, paid for her sex, and around escorts and drugs. What then is the connection, if you could elaborate on why this is significant in the Gilgo case?
Sure. First of all, consider this, that here is Chief Burke in 2011, when he's a high official in the Suffolk County Police ranks. He's not yet appointed as the chief, but he's on his way there. He's just about there. And there is an investigation ongoing because these people are missing. Certainly Shannon is missing at this stage, and various bodies have already been found. And under those circumstances, a high police official from Suffolk County goes and parties in Oak Beach itself with drugs and with prostitution. That suggests an arrogance and a certainty in his mind that he could pretty much do whatever he wanted with regard to that investigation. That's just the beginning. I mean, that itself is fairly outrageous. We've heard over the course of time, you've all heard many rumors about Chief Burke being involved, but nobody's been able to pin it down. Now, we have someone who comes forward, who has credibility, is willing to take a lie detector test, has already gone under oath in a case to say what you've just heard, that Jimmy Burke is directly involved in prostitution at Oak Beach. He's willing to pay for sex at Oak Beach, and he's at a party with drugs and such, that kind of a wild party in Oak Beach. It's not everybody from the police department in any place that visits the scene of a crime, an unsolved crime, and does that. There's got to be strong reasons for that. I say that at the very least, it finally brings the direct connection between Burke and those poor dead victims lying along Ocean Parkway. Jimmy Burke is now moved into the circle of suspect in direct relation to the deaths of those victims, as well, and one of them was an Asian cross-dressing male, and he's moved into the circle of suspects for the death of Shannon Gilbert. When you take that and also combine it with his relationship, which we now know exists, with Dr. Peter Hackett, it certainly puts him right at the center of the pool of suspects for the death of Shannon Gilbert and the
So
other.
you think he may have actually committed the crimes themselves or covered it up, or what specifically?
I wish I had. I wish I had solved the case at this point. You know, that would be wonderful.
Isn't it true that Mr. Burke was under internal affairs investigation at the time of his appointment as police chief?
We heard from the police themselves that he was under internal affairs investigation by the police when he was appointed as chief. Remember, he's appointed as chief of police only days after Shannon Gilbert has been found, and now he takes over. Before that, though, he was in a position important enough to affect all that investigation that was going on. Now he takes charge of it, and it's right from that point forward that there's an enormous suppression of evidence here, and appears to be willful neglect of the investigation of this case. Why? We think because Burke himself participated in that. This new evidence is the first grand step towards proving that. So I don't have the smoking gun that Burke strangled this person or asphyxiated that person yet. I don't have that even as to Dr. Peter Hackett, but I have very, very strong circumstantial evidence.
Is there any knowledge of Burke renting a home on Gilgo?
We don't know that, we don't have no knowledge that Burke has rented a home in Gilgo. There are many other suspects that did, though, that lived in that area at that time, so not everybody's off the hook yet. And there is some suggestion that there is at least a relationship of more than one person to these deaths, possibly one killer with accomplices, possibly more than one.
Interject on your question.
Sure.
You asked me about the tip. The tip was in regards to someone who lives on Oak Beach full time, and was good friends with Jimmy Brewer. So why would they?
Joe Brewer.
Jimmy Burke, sorry. Whose number was found in Jimmy Burke's phone. That was his admission to me, the person that I called the tip in on. So, I mean, it just kind of like makes you wonder why Detective Pertola would tell this person, I called in a tip, I was the source of the tip.
So, John, to clarify the point before, are you outright accusing Jimmy Burke of possibly being the Gilgo Beach serial killer?
Yes.
But you previously maintained you thought it was Peter Hackett.
We say I say it can be more than one. I said, as you heard me say, he can be the prime suspect with an accomplice, or it could be vice versa, or it could be others as well. We don't have the smoking gun yet, but we now have that kind of evidence. Nothing points away from Peter Hackett. Nothing that we have, and more now than ever points towards Peter Hackett in a different respect. You saw yesterday's headline story that the body, the trunk of Peaches, one of the victims, who was located in the Hempstead Lake Park, was connected to Peaches by DNA, and Peaches is the person connected to the child. The police had that information for, we think now well over a year, close to 2 years. They didn't reveal that to anyone. But the main point is this: it's in Hempstead. 2 other trunks are found in Manorville. 11 bodies are found in Oak Beach, or Gilgo Beach. Dr. Peter Hackett lives in Oak Beach. The bodies are found only several yards behind, one body behind his house. The rest of them along the parkway that goes from his house to his other house in Point Lookout. He's located there. Peter Hackett testified that Peter Hackett was on Halsey Manor Road, traveling from the recovery site at Flight 800 when it crashed, up to the reconstruction site at the Grumman Airport in Calverton. He used Halsey Manor Road to get there. So he's available and aware of that particular location. And Peter Hackett also indicated under oath that his leg, he's missing a leg, that his leg was removed at Hempstead Hospital, and his father was the chief administrator of Hempstead Hospital back in the day, just before this first victim in 1997 was found.
Was Peter Hackett at the
He's
party?
in all 3 locations.
Was he at the party you were at?
I did not see Peter Hackett. No.
John, have you brought this information to the police or FBI, and will you?
I have not brought the information you've heard today to the police or the FBI yet. I have every intention of cooperating with the police and the FBI. I have done so all along. But oddly enough, here I am, a civil lawyer, investigating this case through a civil case, or an important civil case that's pending. We have much, much credible evidence of the kind I've just told you about, and testimony. And the police indicated to me in January, after Dr. Bodden did his autopsy, that the police wanted me to cooperate with them. I agreed to do it. I have never heard from them once since then, and I've gathered substantially more evidence. I've never heard from them again. I also met with the FBI and my homicide investigator for over 2 hours. They too asked for the information I had at that time. I gave it to them. To date, we've heard nothing. Nonetheless, we are willing to give the police what we have so to advance this case and bring out the truth.
I initially
That's
turned
what-
away the FBI when they offered assistance in the murders.
I believe that Chief Burke was instrumental in avoiding the use of other police agencies, including the FBI. For example, 2 of those bodies along Ocean Parkway are found over the Nassau County border line. They are in Nassau County. That would be Nassau County Homicide's job to investigate. But they were told, and I have it on good sources, that Nassau County could stay out of the investigation and leave it to Suffolk County. Likewise, the state of New York was told, stay out, Suffolk County will handle it, and finally, so was the FBI. That source, we believe, is Burke. I don't have literal evidence of that, but we have, as I said, circumstantial evidence. It's very strong.
Leanne, you're coming forward, you're showing your face, you're letting us know who you are. Talk about your bravery here. I mean, people online are calling you brave. Like, what is it that allows you to be open about this information and want to come forward?
Because that could be my grave.
As in, you could be one.
That could have been my grave. There's a child who died. This is bigger than me. It's not about me. Yeah, so what? I'm on the news. I mean, yeah, so what? I may look like a street urchin. Yeah, so what? But if in some way I'm able to, first of all, identify a child who doesn't even have a name yet, or give Lorraine Ella, the mother of Megan Waterman, some closure. I don't care about my reputation. Come on, like, it's bigger than me.
Leanne, did you witness Burke using cocaine or any other illegal drugs at the parties?
Yeah,
Can you tell us what?
snorting coke.
It's a known fact that Mr. Burke had problems maintaining his weapon. At any point in time, he must have been to be able to do what you did with him. At any time, did he have a holster? Did he holster his weapon? Did he protect his weapon at any time, or was it? Did you ever witness a weapon?
I didn't see a weapon on Mr. Burke.
All right, thanks.
John, could you just explain again what your lawsuit is attempting to do? Your civil case?
Yeah. We have sued Dr. Peter Hackett as the person responsible for the death of Shannon Gilbert. And we survived a motion to dismiss that case, and it's proceeded for now several years. It enables me to investigate this case in a way that an ordinary person would not have. I have subpoena power, I have the ability to take depositions, to gather evidence, and I have done that. We've spent, in my firm, over 900 hours now total in doing so, and we've gathered a huge amount of evidence in this regard. So it's enabled us to do that with the ultimate goal of establishing the truth. Certainly Hackett's involved, certainly Hackett involved himself, and certainly everything in this case so far of the evidence we have is consistent with Hackett being the person responsible. So that's why we're doing it.
And then how confident are you that you're going to be able to depose Jimmy Burke?
Well, that requires a complicated answer. I know you guys won't get all this, but on the TV it won't fit. But basically what happens is Dr. Hackett has made a motion to dismiss our case now, a summary judgment motion, to throw it out. We have made a motion to make Hackett come back and testify and to disqualify his attorney. We've also made a motion to get the 911 tapes. And those motions are all pending right now in court. We're awaiting the judge to make a ruling on that. It got complicated when Mary Gilbert, who was the administrator of Shannon's estate, is murdered by her other daughter, who was insane. And that complicated because now we had to go and form an estate or substitute the estate with a new person in the case. And Francis here was substituted in as one of the co-administrators, along with Cherie, the daughter of Mary. Result, that slowed the whole case down several months until we got that done. We got it done right away, as quickly as we could. That's all pending before the judge. So right now, therefore, I cannot take any further steps within the case to take depositions within the case because of the pendency of that motion. It stops me automatically by law. I can still investigate. I can still take testimony from her in the form of a deposition, for example. But I just can't go and, force the adversary to testify, bring witnesses in to testify. Adam running a prostitution ring out of a telephone registered to Burke's address in his home in St. James, Smithtown, back in the 90s. And it lasted for about 10 years. So Chief Burke was involved in carrying out prostitution as well as soliciting prostitutes.
But now that your image is out there, people, are you concerned for your... look, what we've seen on the record is some really underhanded tactics by Chief Burke and people he knows. Are you concerned for your safety going forward?
I'd be concerned if I didn't say anything and I was an anonymous person. You've seen my face now. If I end up dead, you're not going to ask why? To cover my tracks and to protect myself, I told the person whom I had called the tip in, I said to them, hey, listen, I got a call from Suffolk, because he'd been questioned before on the homicide. The person I called the tip in had been questioned before. So I figured it wasn't far-fetched that, maybe they'd call me up just out of the blue. So I made a story that, hey, this person, Detective Pertola, just called me to check in on me and see, what my thoughts were on this, considering my area of study, and just to see if maybe anything I've noticed, anything afoot. And of course I said no, nothing was wrong, everything was fine. Trying to cover my own tracks, because this person is related to judges, councilmen, politicians. So I wanted to get ahead of it in case the corruption that we know exists in the Suffolk County Police Department revealed to this person that I had called in had spoken to them. So my thought was make him think that they had just called me, that I wasn't a source of a tip. So when this person called Detective Pertola and said, hey, I heard you were calling my friend about my involvement in Gilgo, and he said, well, she was the one who called in the tip. She was the source. She's the CI.
What was it that possessed you to call in the tip on this person a few months ago?
I'd rather not say. It was enough for me as someone with a little bit of, again, education and background in forensic psych to, he fit the profile. He, Oak Beach, boating, access to certain things, age, travel, the break in murders between 1996, 2003, and then, 2009, he was a family man, and he had police knowledge, so, it made me suspicious, and I just thought on a lark, let me just call this tip in to make sure that I'm not leaving a stone unturned that I could regret 10 years from now and feel guilty about. So I just called it in, and then they decided to call me back 3 months later and say that it got lost and that they were following up on it now.
But then they said they had already spoken to him about
They had, apparently he'd been a suspect, not a suspect, but someone that they had. The exact words between Pertola and I were, before we hang up, can you just tell me his name so I can check to see if it's in the database? So I gave him his name, and he said, I don't even need to check. We've gotten 2 calls on him already from police, domestic, from women, young prostitutes. So I don't even need to check. So when I hung up the phone with Pertola, a little bit of fear and a little bit of, wanting to cover my tracks, I thought it would be better if he heard from me that they were calling me, and to make it look like they reached out to me and I never called in a tip. Instead, when he called Pertola said, no, she called in the tip on you, she's the tipster, she's the CI, and the person happened to be someone with a little bit of authority over me, so it made the situation difficult. I then reached out to some reporters who were doing a documentary on it, because I thought that there was a real corrupt. I got up the courage to trust police when I don't really have that trust, and then they threw me under the bus. So I called up some reporters. They're actually here today. They're in the back with A&E, and I told them what had happened, considering their last episode. Mind you, let me interject, Pertola was the one who told me to watch their docuseries, which I thought was kind of interesting. He told me to watch their docuseries, and the very last one was on the corruption of the Suffolk County Police Department. I said, well, I have a story of corruption, so I contacted them, and I spoke with them, and then I reached out to Mr. Ray because I needed to have some protection legally, and I reached out to Mr. Ray only on the tip factor alone, and then he started asking me questions about my involvement further in the industry, and then he asked me, had I ever been to any parties, and I said, well yeah, yeah. And he asked me if Jimmy Burke was anyone I'd ever, encountered, and I said, well, my credibility, yeah. It's not about whether I've done this or whether I've done that or what I do or what I've done. It's right there, plain as day. It doesn't matter what I've done or if I've, behaved in a certain manner in the past or I've been arrested. That's irrelevant. I have it right here. It's from your phone. You did it. If I have to, pay the piper in front of a judge, which has happened, why don't you admit to what you did wrong? But they won't do that. They're hiding something. It's very clear that they're hiding something. What I think, my personal opinion, is that they know who did it. They want to clear the case, but they can't clear the case without recusing themselves from any responsibility. And they're stuck.
And they can't recuse themselves from any responsibility. Is this related to what you said before about other Suffolk County police being present at parties that you went to and being
and being probably influenced by Burke to stall the investigation. Someone asked if they thought that the investigation was stalled, the FBI was stalled. Of course, in my opinion, yeah, that was Burke stalling the investigation. The FBI has more resources. They have more, education on catching serial killers. Why would you want to include them in that case? Of course you're going to stall it.
You've been a sex worker for 6 years, you said? Can you elaborate just a little more? Like, why did you decide to
pay for college? I paid for college, I got my degree, and I don't regret it for a second.
Did any of these encounters go from the house to the actual beach, for instance?
No, I don't have anyone watching over me as in terms of a pimp. I'm more of a sugar baby, so I'll be in a relationship for a long time with one person. But that doesn't mean that I haven't, had one-time experiences. I prefer to, stick with one person, and that's more within my comfort zone. But this county's really corrupt. I can't tell you really anymore. My client list would probably blow you out of the water.
Do you work for an escort service?
No.
And you're still actively involved in the sex industry?
I am with one person.
And that also helps pay for your graduate school?
I hope so.
You're going to graduate school now?
I'm applying to I'm applying for fall 2017.
And the person that you called the tip about, what was your relationship to them? You said that they had some authority over you.
I think we have to leave that. We just can't expose that person at this stage, and it's not going to advance the point. It's collateral. We've had various people tell us a lot of hearsay. This is now someone who's with first-hand knowledge.
And did she come to you, or did you?
Yeah, she came to me.
I did, yes.
So what made you want to come forward?
Actually, I came forward because of a tip that I had called in to Suffolk County regarding someone that was neither of these two men, but does know one of them, Jimmy Burke, quite well. He thinks Jimmy Burke's a great guy, by the way. His phone number was found in Jim Burke's phone when he was arrested. Regardless, I came in because my tip, I was revealed as a tipster. And by Detective Pertola. I was revealed as a tipster to the person that I called the tip in on after I had said that I would actively cooperate with them in giving them my client list. So, I mean, what motivation he had for letting him know that is beyond me. The only thing that I can think of is some sort of, I mean, draw your own conclusions. But I'm not making it up. I can prove it. It was a discussion in text on a Suffolk County police issued phone. The detective texted me from that phone. That's when the conversation took place, where he acknowledged that he did in fact tell him that I was the CI. So this isn't something that I'm just, pulling out of thin air. I actually can prove it. So that was really disconcerting for me. So I came to John Ray after I'd heard his name. I spoke with the two individuals who are the producers or the documentarians of the killing season, and they had mentioned his name, and I figured it would probably be a really good idea at this point to get a legal advocate, because this could get really bad.
Can I just ask two questions quickly? One is, obviously, this is probably the obvious question, but you were the tipster under the condition of anonymity, right?
Yes.
You made that clear, just to be clear, that you would remain anonymous.
Yes.
Okay. And then number two, as I understand, so you weren't an escort at the time that you had sexual relations with Burke?
No.
So the implication is that he thought you were an escort?
Yes.
Okay.
And he paid for it. He actually paid for the sex.